That was 2 years ago after his second injury. Then 23, he had no injuries. He lost weight. He went into Tai Chi, Tai Bo, whatever. And then last night, I blame this strictly on the rules right here, not anything else, because we don't walk on eggshells anymore, Doc. We don't practice like we play anymore. And nobody's scared. And quarterbacks know every day they don't get hit like that. So they think guys are going to jump over them right there and hurdle over them right there. I just think Roger Goodell and the committees have created this. But just dive into what you told me last night, what you think going on, and what your professional opinion on Tua, and not only injury-wise, but what you think he should do.
So when you look at this, first of all, he was playing awful before that, but that's kind of a moot point at this point.
That's who he is.
Yeah. When he made the decision to run the first down, it was 4th and 4, whatever it was, on like the 10, so it made sense. And I wouldn't say lowered his head, but he ran he caused more trauma. Like, Hamlin didn't even try to tackle him. He basically just stood in front of him. The irony that was DeMar Hamlin is kind of crazy.
I know.
But nonetheless, that was Tua's doing. That wasn't Hamlin's. It's not like Hamlin ran into him. And, if Hamlin wasn't there, I don't think Tua would have sustained a concussion. It was the nature of the angle of his head and neck. But at the same time, it wasn't really a lot of force.
No, it wasn't.
Right? It was just a perfect storm. But this is what we see in people who sustain recurrent concussions. Your what we call threshold for sustaining a concussion is lower. So if it takes someone up here to sustain a concussion, it may take Tua here. So if he sustains hit, boom, concussion. And he may have weak ligaments in his neck, so they can't handle that force. So automatically it translates to the brain. Then you saw him, what we call fence, kind of that right arm again, which is a distorted posturing. And we saw this 2 years ago on 9/29. I tweeted about it because you could see it. Remember when he had kind of the hands up thing?
Yeah.
That was also on a Thursday night. That was also 4 days after playing on a Sunday. And on Sunday, remember they had that one that they called a back injury and they allowed him to return. Remember that?
Yep.
That was my video. That was the video I made, yeah.
And then 4 days later, he had that crazy one and he missed 2 games. And then he was okay for, we'll call it 5 games. I don't know how much it was. Then he suffered another one on Christmas that ended his season, and he didn't get cleared until February of 23, I guess it would be. And then he did all of his judo and jiu-jitsu and gained weight and had a good year last year. The Dolphins were obviously worried about this. They executed his 5th-year option and said, hey, basically, in my opinion, stay healthy and prove you can be elite in 23. And then they signed the big bag this year. But that risk didn't go down.
No.
He got lucky or was smart where he was very cautious last year. Maybe he let his guard down this year because he didn't focus on it, because he didn't get one last year. He's like, I must be pretty good. Unfortunately, the brain doesn't forget.
Right.
And now you have several different scenarios in play here. First of all, you only sustain posturing, usually almost always during a level of unconsciousness. But you only sustain unconsciousness in about 11% of concussions. So it's not that much. And this is his second time. So obviously he's predisposed to doing this. And it's not like, this was a kickoff return and he was running full force at someone. The dude was probably running 10 miles an hour.
That's a regular
hit.
It's not a lot of impact at all.
No, I mean, Hammond literally caught him. So it's it's not like he even ran into him. So this wasn't a lot of force. And another question that I asked myself is, why is he not wearing a guardian cap? I know they look stupid, but if you're that high risk, even if it helps 10%, I mean, if you can prevent another concussion, I usually tell this to my brain patients. You can replace your knee. You can't replace your brain. And let's think about situationally where he was mentally and I guess socially 2 years ago versus now. I don't think he had been married yet. Obviously, I think he still had 2 kids, but maybe they were still young. He hadn't secured the bag, even though he had more than most of us will ever see. Now he's married. He's got multiple kids. He got what, 167 million, whatever the price is of guaranteed money. Like where do you go here? The problem. Then the next question becomes: do the docs clear him? That's on them, right? That's my
Doc,
mentor
would
is a team
you,
doc.
if you was in Miami right now as the doctor, would you clear him after what all you've seen?
Because Doc, I know you're hesitant. Because tell people why you're hesitant. Because there's a lot of things involved in this, right? A lot of corporate money, a lot of pressure from corporate entities.
So remember who the team docs work for. It's part of the reason why I'm not a team doc.
Yeah,
there's other factors to it, but remember, at the end of the day, the team doc works for the owner. That's it. Like at the end, I know you want to say, yeah, he works for the players. The players don't pay him. The owner
just forked over $220. That owner just forked over $220 to that man, and now you're going to tell him he's done. Well, I just lost
another separate topic for a separate day. I've heard some crazy stories about players' money to the team doc and getting them back on the field, and I'm sure you guys have as well.
Oh yeah.
So whether that's and obviously that's just part of the game, or it used to be, but at the same time, they're going to say, okay, you have their goal is to say he's cleared the current concussion symptoms. That's not going to be today. That's going to be days to weeks down the road, if not longer. Then the question becomes, is he back to baseline Tua? Yesterday morning, we'll call it. Then that should be enough to clear him from the protocol. But that's a separate discussion of whether or not he should return. Right? That's just saying you cleared the protocol. Okay, you are no longer in the concussion protocol. You can run, you can get your heart rate up without having new symptoms.
And
it's a 5-day protocol. That's the fastest you can do, and technically in the NFL if you follow the guidelines. So at the minimum, he needs at least 5 days.
Just for clarity and context, after 22 season ended, he got hurt at the end of that year. I think Christmas or whatever.
Christmas, yep.
He wasn't cleared from what I'm reading until March 30th.
I don't know if I have to look at. I have it down as February, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was March. But nonetheless, that is very long.
So
85% of NFL concussions either miss 0 or 1 game. That means they get cleared within basically 10 days, right?
Right.
You have very few guys that have retired from concussions. Jordan Reed is probably the only one that comes to mind. I'm sure there's others, but he was probably the most famous. It's not common, but you have to think about what this is collectively doing to your brain. If every hit is leading to more dementia, whether it's now or 10 years or 20 years from now, is it really worth the risk? Some people would say yes. But you
gotta think about that. Yeah.
And then the other question becomes, even if they clear him, meaning that he's no longer in the protocol, do they allow him to come back?
The NFL,
right? And that's the moral dilemma right there. I know, Ross maybe wants it financially, best interest of the team, but at some point, the NFLPA and whoever the powers that be need to step up and say, maybe Stills, Dr. Stills, I think his name is, needs to look at this and say, you know what, like, there isn't a specific guideline to say this number of concussions, you can't play anymore. And it's ultimately going to be up to Tua. But the question becomes, can the medical staff say it is in our best interest to not medically clear you to return, even if you have cleared the protocol? I don't know what that looks like.
So
maybe
Doc,
it's going to take some pressure from the public or whatever you want to call it.
So a question for me, and you, and apologize if you already kind of said this. I just want to get some clarity. So, is it possible, or are humans sometimes, are people born with, I guess, deficiencies per se, to where like you're more susceptible to this type of injury, or are you just saying that once you get a concussion, once you get your first concussion, now at that point you are just more susceptible to a repeat of that action?
Both.
Ooh, okay.
There is a genetic variant that your brainstem is born or sits lower in your canal, and you are more susceptible to concussions. Obviously, I don't know if he has this. I need to see an MRI. Whether or not he has that is is just more icing. But every concussion is a higher risk for a new concussion. And the data, it's not really pretty, but it's there. He is technically at increased risk for another concussion. I think it's 7x over the next 90 days, which is basically the rest of the season, or at least the regular season. You know, and you know, if I was his doc, I mean, and he probably lives 20 minutes north of me. I'm in Miami. He should be doing hyperbaric chamber, hard chamber daily, hour and a half. He should be doing something called IV methylene blue. That's something I do in my clinic for my brain patients. And he should be doing a bunch of other stuff. Do we need to evaluate his neck? Are the ligaments of his neck so weak and unstable that he can't sustain a force without that neck translating that energy to the brain, which then translates to a concussion? So there's other things that maybe traditional medicine, I know traditional medicine doesn't look at, but at this point you need to step back and look at all the options, because this is kind of the face of the franchise, whether or not you want to agree, you know, with it should be. But Tua was pretty much, or Tyreek was pretty much irrelevant last night. Yeah. Waddle was pretty much irrelevant last night. They basically gave the ball to Achane 29 times, which is way more than he's ever had, by 7, I think, coming off of an ankle injury, which is kind of ironic. But Tua looked awful before this, right? Yeah. I mean, he literally threw a ball mid-air and dude just caught it and like ran it in like it was like they were just playing, you know, in the backyard.
He is bad, bro.
Like, and whether it's maybe the Bills just have their number and we've seen the data on that, that's pretty obvious. But nonetheless, it's like, it's tough. He's probably the best quarterback, at least they have on the roster for this team. But now you have to step back and say, I don't know if it's in his best interest to return and retire. Like, Doc, you can be an amazing broadcaster. You can go chill with your family in Hawaii, like whatever you want to do. It's probably not in your best interest to take contact hits weekly.
Doc, I started the show off with a poll question, and I just said, real simply, I said, Tua should blank. What would you fill that blank in with?
In my opinion, retire.
Woo!
Really?
I mean,
not a year off, not.
We saw him basically take a year off. What happened?
I know.
He didn't suffer one last year.
You've seen Deshaun
His wrist didn't go down.
No, it doesn't go down.
You know, and think about it. This is, I won't call it a true subconcussive blow, but this wasn't exactly a big hit.
No.
You know, it's not like the ground was frozen. It's 85 degrees here.
And Doc, explain that real quick. And I appreciate you coming on. Explain the big hit possibility, or explain the big hit that you just used. This is what they don't get. It wasn't a big hit, and he still got the same thing that he would have got with a big hit.
So imagine when he does get a big hit.
Correct.
Well, it's just what Doc's point is. He's going to get a concussion by a guy breathing on him in the future. Like, this is not going to.
His threshold for a concussion and a seizure, for that matter, is really low. Right? And furthermore, I'm going to scare you all on purpose. There's something called second impact syndrome. Okay, you may have heard of this. If you haven't, you can Google it. What this means is that if a person comes back and suffers a new head injury before the first one has cleared, the brainstem can swell and you die immediately. It's rare for obvious reasons, but it's real.
That's why they make us in college go through a protocol, right? Concussion
Correct.
protocol, and you got to
remember now back when you guys were there, you know, there wasn't really much of a protocol. You know, I'm good. You got your bell rung. It's a lot stricter now, even though, you know, they have guys calling from the stands and, you know, docs checking everything, you know, but nonetheless, like, and when I said subconcussive blow, that usually insinuates a lineman running into another lineman at very close proximity. Those micro hits can lead to technically to little concussions, but it's usually not dramatic like Tua's. What I'm saying is that was similar to Tua's situation, but he wasn't a lineman running into a lineman that was 12 inches away. He was kind of running maybe 10 or 15 at the most. into a player that was basically just standing there and catching him. He almost basically caught him. So what happens if he gets sacked and his head hits the turf and you're playing in Buffalo or you're playing in any cold weather city where the ground is like concrete, or you're playing on turf, which means the ground is concrete. So it's like,
Scary.
you know, there's all these different things that you have to think of. There's no easy answer here. It's just shades of gray. And whatever his decision is, we have to respect it. But at the same time, I don't know. This is tough. You know, there's tons of other injuries to talk about, but this is obviously kind of the most important.